All right, I'm Tim McInerney. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm the town administrator. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, if you can't hear us when we're talking, because we're not professional microphone speakers or singers, if we do this and you stop hearing us, just raise your hand and tell us you can't hear us so we can bring it back to our face and you can hear us, okay?
But actually, we can get people to move up a little bit more too. There's plenty of space.
No, we're not gonna bite.
And it may be better to look at the screen so you can see what's actually there. If you move up a little bit.
Use the microphone. What are you doing?
Sorry, I was just going to say, if you could move up because the resolution on the screen isn't great, you may be able to see it a little bit better.
Sir, who are you?
Michael Malinowski, I'm the president of the Grafton Upton Railroad.
So we're here for two reasons, well, maybe three. There are some upgrades going to happen to this intersection. We've asked people via Facebook. We've gotten a pretty sound response in terms of the solution. We're trying to solve for two things: traffic problems and congestion, and the noise of the horns blowing from the trains. In order to solve that problem, we need to do some things with the intersection to make it safe and to get the FRA to approve a quiet zone, which we have to make application for. So we're going to talk about those things. No decisions have been made. The Board of Selectmen wanted to have this meeting so we could hear what people in the neighborhood had to say. That's why we're at this particular location. So I'm going to have Michael talk about the plans for the intersection to improve it and put the signals and the gates in. So that's one level that's going to happen no matter what. And then there's another level, if we wanted it to be a quiet zone, there's a further infrastructure improvement that needs to happen to get it to be a quiet zone. And there's a couple ways to get there. So I'm going to let Michael talk about those particular pieces. I'm sure you have other questions relative to the railroad itself, and I think you'll be open to those questions as we move forward. But let's go through the initial thought process that the Board of Selectmen had heard, or the Select Board has been now called, from the Grafton Upton Railroad relative to this intersection, and then we can move on to other pieces. Any questions before we begin? All right, I'm going to give you to Michael, and we'll be here to take notes. If you see me or Becca on our phone, I don't have paper. I won't be texting. I'll really just be taking notes. So don't think I'm sending emails or text. Yes?
Is this a quiet zone now?
No.
I didn't think so.
No, because it's too noisy to be
You're trying to
quiet.
make it a quiet zone.
We want to make it a quiet zone, but there's things we have to do to do
Because
that.
people have been complaining of it?
About the noise, yes.
They have.
Yep.
Thank you, Tim, and I'll try to speak loud too in case the microphone doesn't work properly. I don't hold it in the right fashion. So my name is Michael Malinowski. I'm the president of the Grafton Upton Railroad. I took over actively running the railroad about 3 years ago. Prior to that, I was not involved in the railroad. And since that time, I think we've been able to do a lot of changes and also improve a lot of communication between the town and us. If there's an issue, Tim generally calls or texts me immediately, or Becca, and we try to resolve issues that are within our control to identify. I want to introduce just a couple of the people that are here. John DeWally, over to the left, the big tall guy. John is the general manager, vice president of our railroad operations. John is on site every day, 5 days a week. He oversees the day-to-day operations with the crew running the railroad and all of our other operations that are tied into that. Also up front with me is Norma Griffiths. She is the crossings and trespassing regional manager for FRA. She's really here just to listen and answer any questions you have. She's not really here to give an opinion on anything. It's just that FRA has the rules. We as a short line have to follow FRA's rules, and because putting in a quiet zone is a complicated process, when the selectmen asked to have this meeting, we asked Norma to come down and actually just be here. And she has a couple handouts, only a few of them for the select board or others if they want to take those back, but they're available on the website also for that. So let me just, before I get into the presentation, and just what you see running behind us, and this is part of the traffic study that was done. This is what the existing intersection looks like. This was shared with the Board of Selectmen, was viewed in a Board of Selectmen's meeting. This is what the actual traffic counts are of what the existing traffic is in the existing circulation that we have today. Before I get into the presentation, just a couple updates on the railroad. We've gone through some significant infrastructure upgrades in the last 18 months. This includes building additional storage track and a new locomotive building at our North Grafton facility. We are still waiting for National Grid to connect the power to the building. We're anticipating that's going to be the end of next week, John. Just with the strike that happened last year and everything, it takes a while for National Grid to get online to do everything. Our facility, we've been partially running off a generator, but once the power's connected, we'll then have that running as designed. One of the upgrades that we've done to the facility is right now in the winter we're running 2 locomotives. Those locomotives are still running outside right now. Our anticipation is that by the end of next week that we will then be able to put them in a heated facility and they'll be able to run in that and be turned off at night, so they'll be in the heated facility with them being turned off. Again, a little bit longer than we anticipated, but that plan is coming together. In addition to that, through some cooperation with the state, we've added in 4 APU units. AP units are an auxiliary power unit. What we have put on is an electric hot start. One of the things that I want to explain about locomotives is that it's not that we want to run them 24/7. We don't. Why? Because it costs fuel. But why do we have to? Locomotives, unlike your cars, don't have antifreeze. They have just pure water running through them. So when the temperature drops below 40, there's valves on there that just drain the whole engine. If you don't have water in there, you can't cool it. If it drops below 40, then the whole block freezes. That's why you have those circulators in there. So if the engine's running, it keeps everything warm. Again, I anticipate by the end of next week that we should have the building functional and we'll be able to put the locomotives in there and we won't be running those at night anymore. And plus we've added these additional 4 hot starts. So I know that was discussed a while ago, and again, just an update on where that is. Yes, sir?
So you don't put antifreeze in
Yeah, they're not designed for that. Locomotives aren't designed to run antifreeze. There's no locomotive on the market that's designed to do that. That's just how they're designed. And we don't build locomotives, so
every locomotive
through the whole country. Yep. Yep. And some of the larger class 1s, they don't even do what we're doing, which is with the hot starts. Again, it is what it is. I can't change that. That's just what it is. Okay. Out of our control. And again, if it's within our control, we try to do it. When we were doing some yard work, rebuilding a bunch of tracks over the last year, we've had to move those locomotives in different places on the yard. So even though they've been running every winter through 24/7 through the winters, they were always being run right up on our main, next to our main building. But over this last year, we had to do track work, and sometimes we had to put them in different locations.
Yeah, I know, I saw the smoke.
Yeah, when Tim would call about where they were, where we had the possibility, we tried to move them around or box them in between rail cars on both sides, but there had to be some movement that was there. So again, I'm just telling you what it is. It's there. So just a little bit about a background before we get into the presentation. We've gone to the Board of Selectmen last time on October 1st and another time back this summer to kind of talk about what we were looking to do with some of the work that's done. Part of my background is I also have an extensive government background and in managing multiple organizations. And one of the things that I try to do with any organization that I do is try to be upfront and as transparent and look ahead. When you're running a railroad business or most business, you have the foresight of what's going to happen. And one of the things that we noticed is that Grafton is having a lot of development. Beyond just the railroad, there's other development that's happening. There's other development you want to have happen further down Route 30 and bring in more tax revenue. What does that do? That continues to bring more cars and more trucks and more traffic into the community. It's the negative part of progress. Is that if you want economic progress, sometimes you have also capacity issues. So with that, we were moving forward with upgrading our rail line, and with that, we received some partial funding from the state and feds to upgrade through a section called Section 130, the crossings at Route 30 and East Street. And with that, we're putting in new crossings in it, new railroad crossing, new rails, new rubber, and then gates coming on as we've done elsewhere in town. And so we were going to be changing that intersection. And before we started that work is when we reached out to the town and said, you know, we can do this just to satisfy our needs, and that's what the funding's there to do. And we're going to take the same configuration, the same everything we have right now. We're just going to put in new rail, and we're going to put in gates. And we're going to link those gates with a preemptive so they're tied into the traffic signal circuit. And I said, and we're going to do that because it needs to have gates in there from a safety standpoint. And from a signal standpoint, otherwise we have to have a guy in a car going around with the flag and trying to stop the traffic, and sometimes people don't pay attention to the guy in the street. That's why you put the gates down. But in analyzing that, we said we're already going to be spending X number of dollars, and you know, whatever the number is, it's many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we said this is an opportunity, should the selectmen want to do this, for us to take what funds we have to build this out and say, what is the long-term growth of the town, irrelevant of the railroad? The railroad doesn't matter here, and I want to point that out. The railroad is happy with any one of these options that we're going to talk about. It doesn't matter because the railroad just goes across and back and forth as it needs to service our customers. We're not really concerned about the vehicular traffic as a railroad, okay? So I don't have a dog in this race. I don't care what option the town picks, whether it's A, B, or C. It doesn't matter to the railroad as a railroad operating entity. However, as a good corporate citizen is where we came back and said, let's look at saying, here's the baseline that we're going to do. Do you want to look at some other options to help the town out for some other growth patterns? And in essence, that's really what the focus of this discussion is about. So I'm going to go through the same presentation that we did with the selectmen back in October. I think at that meeting we had, I don't think there was more than a handful of residents at the meeting, maybe off by one or two. Probably both meetings we had that were publicized. So again, the first meeting was on July 30th, and when we had that meeting, we had a traffic study. This traffic study is available at the town. It was given to your traffic study committee. And with that, it talks about several different alternatives that were done. And this study was dated on September 29th. And the first thing you do is you look at what's the existing configuration. What are the current conditions? What are the current conditions that you have right now? That little video that I had going on there before, that shows what the current conditions are at peak times going through that intersection. From there, we then looked at if you don't do anything, nothing happens to the intersection with just normal growth of the town and the business growth that's going to happen. What's the traffic capacity going to be? And that's really what you get to number two, which is the future no-build thing. So if you don't do any improvements, what is that going to look like? And that's what number two was there, no build, no changes are implemented. When we get into A, B, and C, those are different versions of improvements. Alternative A is what we're going to do as the baseline. That's our baseline item. That's what we're going to do because that's just putting gates in and that's tying the gates into the traffic signals. We're not changing any geometric stuff on the intersection. Not changing anything except for, again, gates, signals, and tying in a sensor to the signal when the train goes through. Alternative B and C is where, again, we said, let's use this state and federal fund, Grafton, and look at some other alternatives that are out there, which is B and C. B keeps the intersection working as it is. Let me talk about the intersection. I am not a traffic expert. I am not a traffic engineer. But I know a little bit about traffic engineering, having done this for a while. And I'm going to try to simplify this to the best that I can because it's easy for me to explain. What you have with this intersection is a three-legged intersection. You have three light sequences that have to happen in there. You've got the 140 movement, you've got the Route 30 movement, and then you've got the East Street movement. Each one of those is a separate signal, a separate stop, a separate delay. If you want to look at it this way, let's say to go through all those things, it takes 3 minutes. Minute here, signals go red. Minute here, the signals go green. These green go to red, and blah, blah, blah. So you got 3 cycles that are there trying to get cars to weave in and out because you have that. Obviously, in any modern design, if you go to any new city that's being built down south or out west, you never see 3-legged intersections. You know, up here in Massachusetts, we have rotaries. That's what we do. So under alternative B, it keeps the 3-legged intersection. The only change to the geometric situation is it puts a left-hand turn on Route 140, taking a left onto Route 30 or to East Street. That's the only geometric change in alternative B. Okay? Alternative C is the most aggressive change. It also has the biggest benefit for long-term traffic circulation. Again, I'm not here trying to say that some neighbors versus other neighbors will have more or less impact. That's true. That will happen. There's no doubt about that. But a traffic study doesn't look at each individual house. It looks at the community as a whole. It looks at the area as a whole. It looks at the region as a whole. And so alternative C, although it has the most geometric change, also has the biggest benefit from a traffic circulation for moving cars in and out. Going back to my 3-minute cycle, is that in essence what that does is it takes that light and turns it from a 3 to a 2-legged intersection. So you have Route 140, and then you have Route 30 going into 140. Because it would make East Street a dead end, so you wouldn't have traffic from East Street trying to get into the intersection. It would just be used to escape. It would still allow public safety. There's no delay in public safety by making that one way, because you have the North Grafton Fire Station, and it would still be able to access that road as though it does now. So that's alternative C, and again, I'll go into some pictures of those. And again, this slide right here was really just a summary of what we did on July 30th. You know, we had the video, which I showed. I have videos of each one of these alternatives. The crossing improvements. We had hired a contractor that was going to come in and do the 2 intersections, but they were going to do each intersection one at a time, which would have meant 2 weeks of delay. So what we did is we actually used our construction crew with the contractor, and we did that all in one weekend, as you all know. But we got it done once. We put in all the crossings and the rubber. We got that done all in one weekend versus the 2 that was originally done. And our objective was to get that done by the school opening, which we did. You know, the Board of Selectmen at the time indicated their support to grant or to mitigate noise impacts. And we mentioned that we would need to have a decision in October. We're in November, December, but and the reason why the timing is there is because the grant we have expires on June 30th in 2020, which means that whatever alternative that the railroad does, we have to spend the money by then. And that's why we need to know, is it going to be, we're going to do A, right? We're doing A. But the question is whether or not the town, and it's the town's decision, thinks it's to the benefit of the town to do B or C. And again, we don't care which one you pick. It's just that we're going to start moving forward with A, you know, in the next few weeks to keep that moving along. And then, you know, I think, as everyone knows, the propane plant, we have had no complaints with the propane plant since it's been open. It's been running efficiently and effectively. It's running safe. It's been designed to do what it was supposed to do. The complaints that we're getting, or the town's getting, primarily is from the horn of the trains going through the intersection. And also CSX when they deliver our trains at night. Let me talk about that for a second. We, as the railroad, are not doing anything generally after 6, 7 o'clock. There's really no activity except for maybe a security person on site. That being said, Sunday through Thursday night, at 1 a.m., plus or minus an hour, CSX brings our cars that were in Framingham that go to Worcester, and they bring them and drop them out on our yard, and they take away our empties. So in the middle of the summer, when your windows are open, and you hear the knuckles of the rail cars clanking, or you might hear a whistle, it's not the Grafton and Upton. We're not running at that point. It's CSX delivering our cars and taking our cars away. That's the cycle that they deliver the cars. That's when they come. We don't have any control over that at this point because of the main line, and there's no pace to pull over on the main line currently to allow that to happen. So again, those complaints are real. There's nothing we can do about it. The whistle. The whistle is, there's some things we can do about it. We've done as much as we can. When we cross any road, we have to blow the horn 3 times, 4 times. And that's for each roadway. And so that's for Route 30, East Street, and Ray Street, 12 times. Now, what we did do is we did put it in our SOPs under FRA rules and regulations because East Street and Route 30 are so close to one another, our train crew treats that as one roadway. So, although it's not a huge benefit, but we went down from 8 horn blows there down to 4 horn blows. But again, if you add Ray Street into it, we're down from 12 to 8. But that's what we are required to do from a safety standpoint. We can't stop that unless we go through the process, and when I say we, unless the town, with our support, goes through the process of doing this quiet zone.
You say you toot the horn 4 times
Yes.
to go through. You have an engineer that doesn't do it that long, but he does the 4 times. Then you've got one that really leans on it,
Yeah.
which is annoying to all the neighbors within that region. Now, if you're relying on the horn and you keep saying safety reasons, then why the hell do you have a flag man in front?
Because we don't have gates. Once we have the crossing gates that are in there, then the flag man won't be needed.
Okay, secondly, what about for the gates themselves? Have you done any engineering or checking of piping that's in there? There were gates there before.
So I'll show some plans that we have, and we just redug everything up and we put new conduit in to run new gates. So the rail and the rubber we put in is designed to put new gates in, and we have all the conduits in there to run the wires.
But your feeders that you brought, you've got 2 tubes. That's going to your building, right?
That's a separate line. That's a separate line for electric going to the building. There's
Okay.
other lines that were embedded under the rail that's in the road right now for running wires underneath the rail crossing
Okay,
to
for your
connect to the
trips.
gates. Yes.
Okay, but what about the relay cabinets? Where's that going?
So the relay cabinets is going to get tied into the main traffic signals. Under alternative A is we're going to be taking our crossing gates and tying those into a new and upgraded, or actually what we do.
Joined to the cabinets that are there for the
Yeah, actually the cabinet that's there, we have found out actually can handle this circuit. So we will be tying into this existing circuit that we have.
Is that not a danger point right there of damage? You've got big trucks and tractor trailers that go through, and that's been knocked down several times.
I'm not
Including
denying that.
traffic. No, I'm just telling you what's happening.
We'll have a separate signal. This is what he's asking.
So, as we get into looking at some of these other alternatives, B and C particularly, it would require the geometric changing of some of those turning radiuses, which would lead into a new signal box that will be put into the area for the traffic signals, and also something for our gates.
You know, the reason why I'm saying that is that about 60 years ago, when the tracks were coming in and they had the gates, power source came out from that corner store, which was then Grafton. And that's where the power came for feeding the gates themselves. Has anybody, so in order to save you money from digging up and putting back in any of the piping that's visible to you?
No excavation has to take place for us to put power in. So there's a couple different places we can get power from. The pipes that you see on our pole, that's 3-phase power. There's still a single-phase feed on that pole that we can bring down on Waterville Street. There's a single-phase feed that we can bring down on East Street. And either one of those can go underground to the signal case if it has to cross the road, or it can go to an overhead tie-in too. So there's about 6 or 8 different options that we have, you know, to get power to a signal case.
And one other thing I want to bring up is with the gates themselves, we'll have a little bungalow building that'll have the power to power the gates, and that'll be connected to the traffic signal box from a wire from one to the other. So you can have that preemptive switch of wire connecting the two. So that's fine from the design standpoint, and we've got everything designed for that. Let me go on to the next slide here. So this is the slide, obviously, the intersection. I'm just going to skim over this. I mentioned a lot of this stuff. Currently, right now, the level of service for the existing intersection is at a C in the AM hours and a D in the PM hours. And under the future no growth, or no build, no change model, and you'll see that these level of services go to an E and an F. Now, this is, let me, just give me 1 second here. I'm going to just, I'm going to come back to those two, but I just want to explain this chart right here. This chart is in that traffic report, and really what you have is, the second box is, those can't see, is 2019 existing. The second box, or third box, which has some of the yellow marks, that's the future no build condition. So if nothing's done, that's what the traffic delay will be at each one of those. That shows the intersection will have a 74-second delay and a 118-second delay on average at the peak period for those 2 times. And then the last 3 alternatives, A, B, and C. A, and again, I'm just using the intersection piece here. I'm not going to talk about each one of the roads because they change. Goes down to 50.6 seconds and 87 seconds for the delay without doing any geometric improvements. Alternative B goes down to 24 and 47, and alternative C drops down to 19 seconds and 41 seconds. So again, with each alternative A, B, and C, A is what we're going to do at a minimum. B and C is what can be done in partnership with the town to provide more flow through the intersection for the vehicular cars.
So, sir, could I stop you there for a second?
Sure.
You can make a statistic say anything. You're not magically disappearing traffic. All you're doing is rerouting traffic from that intersection. Is that a fair point?
So both statements are not fair because, first of all, we didn't create this document. This was done by an independent consultant, and this is their expertise.
However,
Depending upon what alternative you're going to do, alternative A, there's no change for rerouting traffic. So no, there's no rerouting traffic for A.
correct.
For B, there's no rerouting traffic. For C, there would be some limited rerouting of traffic to a side road, and that is the negative part of C. Again, C gives you the best benefit for velocity going through there, but it will move some traffic to some streets that didn't have it. At the same time, for East Street, it'll turn it into a dead-end street or a one-way street, so you won't have as many cars going through that portion of that.
But aren't you gonna have them coming back out and getting on Waterville Street to get back through that light if they can't go at the end of the road?
Still gonna get it for the intersection.
You're just
no matter
moving the
what.
light
Right, you're
from
just
one
moving it
section
from
to
one
another.
place to another.
You're potentially moving traffic to intersections that don't have traffic lights.
That is correct. That is one scenario
I
that would
understand
happen.
that you didn't do the study,
Yep.
but your study is on a Grafton Upton presentation
Yep.
with Grafton Upton scenarios of A, B, C, and D. So we could argue that point, but the fact is, it's being presented to us from you, from a traffic study.
Yes.
So-
Alternative C would be
Just so
rerouting
if I
traffic.
could clarify this just a little bit. In order for the rerouting of, the reasoning for rerouting and/or turning things one way, is that to go from 8 whistles to 4? Is that what all this is all about? Maybe you could bring me up to speed at a more rapid
Let me,
pace.
I tried to explain this at the beginning, I didn't do a good job at it, so I'm going to try again. The railroad does not benefit from alternatives B or C.
So that's what I'm asking you right now, is what would be the benefit to all these fine people that are here tonight, wanting to hear what the benefits of A, B, C, and D, dot, 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 dot.
Yep.
So the question is this. The one-way, the dead end, the creating of a new left-hand turn lane, what is the benefit? From the railroad, what benefit is the railroad doing for the citizens? You did make it very clear that regardless of the scenarios, the railroad doesn't gain anything or anything, which kind of was a little discerning for me, to be honest with you, because the one thing that you said that you weren't concerned about, because you said you're not concerned about any one of the scenarios, is the safety of the residents in the neighborhood.
I never
So
said
that-
that. No,
but
no,
you
I
didn't-
never,
you didn't include that.
safety is the first concern of the
But you
railroad.
didn't include that in this scenario. You said you have zero concern. You said you have zero concern about which scenario was picked. And that, for me, as a resident, that would have been a perfect opportunity for the railroad to express that their main concern is safety for the people and the residents of this area. And that was not said.
So let me just
So I
stop
just
you
wanna
here,
know-
because
I just
I don't want to
wanna know
get
right
into
now,
a
I'd
debate,
like to know
and we're
what the
starting
answer
to
to
get
the
into a
question
debate.
is.
If we get into a debate,
I just
we're
wanna
not
know,
going to
guys,
get into the
guys,
slides.
hold on,
Let's,
from-
hold
do
on,
we
let's
go
just
from
answer your
eight
question.
whistles
Hold on,
to 12
listen.
whistles? That's
We're
what I
gonna,
wanna
hey,
know.
we need to have a little bit of respect and courtesy. Let him answer the question relative to what the benefit is to having A, better traffic flow, and B, a quiet zone.
Great,
Those are the two things you
Yeah,
want.
let Mr. Flynn
And
talk. He
We'll
was
go
talking.
from that.
Great.
All right, can you answer those two?
Yes.
All right.
And
Thank you.
let me go to the slides and show that because I want to go back to what we have here. And again, I do not want anyone to leave this room thinking that the railroad does not care about safety. It's our #1 priority for our men, women, and also for people that are along our rail line. That's one of our priorities. This is what you see here as alternative B. The modification to alternative B would be on the top on Route 140. And that would be widening Route 140 and making a little bit of a geometric change up on the top so you can take a little sharper left-hand turn. So trucks that are heading south on 140, you'd be able to have through movement on the right side of those while people were waiting to take a left-hand turn. Currently, right now, when somebody wants to take a left off of 140 south, it blocks up 140 all the way up the hill. And by putting that in there, it would allow those turning movements to happen into that picture. Alternative C is, again, the one that turns this into a one-way street or a dead end coming up East Street. This does reroute traffic. People will find through what's called a gravity model where the easiest way is for them to get from point A to point B. If they're no longer allowed to go up East Street, then they're going to use Institutional Road to go over to 130. I'm sorry, to Route 30. They're going to use other mechanisms, other ways of going around this to avoid getting to find a way through or around this intersection, which will divert some traffic to other roads. No one's denying that. That will happen in here. This is what the alternative C version is. We went through the slides that are there. As we look at the different alternatives, and again, I'm going to summarize what I've already talked about, is alternative A improves the signal optimization and the signal timing, and it does do some decrease in delays in the intersection. So it will be improved from that. Yes, sir.
Wouldn't the gravity affect the other alternative just as well? Is if there's a longer delay at the light, people will reroute and go different ways to try to bypass the intersection period, take Institute Road or anything.
Right, at any
And that wouldn't
intersection.
and that wouldn't disrupt any of the traffic patterns that people choose, like we have with all this construction and everything that's going on when things happen around here. I mean, it's a mess.
Yeah. At some point, if the traffic gets so bad on any intersection, people will just find alternative routes. So I mean, that does happen.
So C just limits. So you're saying C is just limiting people's options.
C is, well, it does limit
It's
your
limiting
options.
people's, yeah,
But what it does though is it allows for more efficient flow.
but it's limiting people's options and their choices of what direction they go.
That's correct. And that's what makes it a difficult choice, is that on one hand, it improves efficiency of moving cars through there. On the other side, it can limit people's options, it can reroute traffic. But I just wanted the selectmen and the town to know that you have options. What option you choose, again, it's not a safety issue. We, as the railroad, don't care, because all three of them are safe. All three of them are safe overall, and it's really up to the town to choose. Yes, sir?
So, to get back to his question, I'll try to be very specific about it. So, if we do A, B, just go through A and say the train can go 2 miles an hour with a flag guy and has to blow his horn 8 times. B, because now he's got gates and everything, he can go 10 miles an hour, no flag guy, and only has to toot his horn twice or 4 times. And C, because you're going to have all the gates in and everything's happy joy, you can go through 10 and never have to blow your horn.
Okay, so let me go through that thing. I'm going to do A, B, and C, okay? The train will be going the same speed at A, B, and C. The train will not have a flagman with A, B, and C because there's going to be gates. There's no flagman. A and B will always have to have the horn blow. C has an option that if we go through the technical process that FRA requires, it gives the town the option of having us not blow the horns through C because we have the geometrical area to put in the additional gates that are going to be needed for that. So C is the only alternative, again, C, that allows for a no horn zone. And again, and that's part of the difficulty here is that C has a benefit of having more velocity go through there. C has the option of having the no horn piece, but C is going to have an impact on some folks.
What does the quiet zone have to do with anything?
I'll tell you, back to my original presentation.
Just say a few more things, please.
Yes.
Okay. I live at 8 Waterville Street. My name is Carmen Paglioni. I've talked to you before at the last meeting. How many times did they blow the horn between 8 and 9 this morning, John? 20. 20 times. Okay? And it's because it's not like just going through 4 times and going on its way to Milford or Upton. You guys are using East Street and Waterville Street as part of your depot.
That's not true.
That is true.
No, it's not true.
You go through the intersection, you blow the horn, you back up, you hook up cars, you come through the intersection again, you blow the horn, you back up, hook up more cars. And this happens
We're
all
not
the time,
using
doesn't it,
it-
John? Come on, you know.
We're not using it as part of the rail yard.
Plus-
It requires, you have to go down far enough to clear the switch, and we have to go back. So
What-
could it be blown 20 times?
What gives you
Absolutely.
the right to use Waterville Street and East Street as part of your depot? And you told me, the last meeting I was at, that you were gonna see about not blowing the horn in East Street, you can make it 4 horn blows for both streets.
Right.
By the FRA. That's not happening.
But-
Well,
but-
that didn't happen,
Carmen,
or it hasn't happened all week.
We do have people that charge the train, and we do have people that do not stop for the flagman. So if the train crew feels that somebody is not yielding to the flagman, they will blow the horn appropriately.
And I asked this question at the last meeting. The administrator was there. I said, what gives you the right to use those 2 streets as part of your depot? And one of the select persons said that you don't have the right to me that night, at that meeting.
I'm only going to tell you, we're operating an active railroad. We're going to go across the street 86 times if that's what it takes to run the railroad, to go back
I
and forth.
personally, I live on Waterville
Yeah.
Street. I've been there for my whole life. I can remember when there was no lights there. It was like Kelly Square in Worcester. The lights that are there right now work perfectly fine. I was glad when those lights came in. They work fine. You
So-
have an alternative motive for wanting East Street to be one way that I'm not getting yet.
Well, you're not getting it because there is no alternative motive for us. Because going back to the other question, the railroad does not lose a flagman by having that one way because A, B, and C, we want to have a flagman. We'll be going through the same miles an hour through the intersection that's there. We are looking at, and we did discuss this at the selectmen's meeting, we've applied for a different grant from the federal government, a Chrissy grant, so we can put a new parallel track on the main line. So that's where we can do a lot of our switching out there so we don't have to bring them into the yard. But there's still a requirement under the Surface Transportation Act that we still have to deliver rail cars. And
I don't care how many
I'm
times
speaking right now.
CSX
No,
drops off
I know,
people.
but I'm speaking right now.
It's got nothing to do with it.
I know, but I'm just telling you what we're doing and what we're looking at options that are there. So you can't find a motive for us wanting to have East Street one way because there is none.
Okay.
We're just giving the town some options. And to your original question, the reason why we're even discussing that was most, if not all, the calls that were coming to the town were for the horns. So we said, okay, if you want to get rid of the horns, there's a process. In order to do that process, we have to figure out if we can design that. In order to design that, we need the geometric area to put the gates in, which means East Street has to be one way. We're not advocating to have no horns. We're not advocating to have East Street one
Didn't you say the gates
way.
are going in, whether it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or whatever it's gonna be?
Absolutely,
Either
I
way,
did.
okay.
But
So-
they're different.
So what's that got to do with the horns?
It's a different gate configuration if we're going to go to the no horn zone. Yes, sir.
So is there any calculus as to any of these changes, if there would be an increase or decrease in the train traffic and how that would affect the longevity of the light, how long the light is? So if you have option C and it makes traffic go faster, but if, as this gentleman says, that that's being used as a back and forth zone, and if it makes it easier for the railroad to do so, what's the point of having the light benefit being less?
So,
when the train is
with all due
blocking traffic
respect,
beginning?
the comment you heard is wrong.
It's not
A,
wrong.
B, and
It's
C.
not wrong, sir.
And let me finish my statement. A, B, and C have the same impact on the rail. The rail is going to go through the same speed. It's not going to extend the yard. It's not going to have any alternatives. A, B, and C doesn't have an impact on it. Because the impact we have is that we're not going to have the flagman out there. So it's going to be safer for our personnel not being out there. And we're going to have the gates there. It's a safer configuration with gates. Gates are safer. Whether it's option A, B, or C, the railroad doesn't benefit from either one of those. That's why, from the get-go, we've come and said, it's your decision, whether you want A, B, or C. A's coming, do you want B or C? If you don't, that's okay too.
What specifically makes the quiet zone, for C? What, besides what specifically with that road?
So let me go through a couple more slides here that I haven't got to. Let's see, just a couple more updates here since we had our June 30th. We did get funding to also upgrade Ray Street. So Ray Street is going to be upgraded just like the other ones, and that will have some sort of signals because those have to be tied in because they're so close together that when one goes up, the next one has to go up.
So there'll be lights at Ray.
So it's going to affect traffic. So Ray, you're still going to have to do the signal.
Ray will have gates.
Right, but you're
Still
still
blow
going to
Yeah, still blow horn.
Still blow the horn. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So from my house, I hear it at 2 Yard, I hear it at Route 30, I hear it at Ray Street, I hear it at Snow Road, and I hear it at the center. That's just your ring. And then I also hear CSX at the MBTA station and Carmen Crossing, all day long.
That's
Every
correct.
day. So what does this do for me?
So the middle paragraph here is that if the town wants to go forward with a quiet zone, then we can petition and go through that process for a quiet zone. That's the only benefit they would have for you from the way you're
Quiet zone
describing
is
it.
just Route 30.
Yeah, quiet zone.
No,
just
no.
on Ray Street.
Oh, I'm sorry. The quiet zone, it's a very detailed process to go through. But I think if we're going to define a quiet zone, it would be from West Pearl Street, right up where our interchange is, through Ray Street. It would have to be at least that far, because it has to be at least a half a mile long for a designated area to do that. It would have to be at least that far. So all four of those crossings would then be considered a quiet zone with the gates going down, if the gates are designed properly and it meets the technical requirements. Okay, it's a whole engineering study to see if that does. But what we can tell you, what our engineers tell us, is A and B do not allow for enough geometric area to put in the appropriate mechanisms to make that work. The only way that it's possibly going to work is because you have such a narrow road in East Street. You all know that. You know how tight it is. You can't fit all the equipment on there with a two-way street. So that's why it has to be one way.
So, if I could.
Can I get some other questions that are here? Yes, ma'am.
I've spent some time, a lot of time, looking at your website with the guidelines for establishing a quiet zone. And I keep seeing it's like as an individual, I can just create a little log line, go in and check off and say, what are the crossings, how many trains are there per day, what is the highway traffic, blah, blah, blah. And that's supposed to calculate a quiet zone risk index. So then if the quiet zone risk index turns out to be less than or equal to nationwide significant risk index, then a quiet zone can be established through public authority designation. Now, where does this part about option C and needing enough physical space for equipment come in?
Let me
That
go.
looks pretty straightforward.
Yeah, let me go to the next slide here. Quiet zone, geometric improvement. Here's like some examples of crossings. These are the same slides we gave before. 4-quadrant gates, 2-quadrant gates. Here's some examples. There's an MBTA line with a 4-quadrant grade with a median in between. And this is the intersection. And this right here is showing what the layout would be for turning that into a quiet zone. And what I want to call your attention to is when you're dealing with the width of the streets. Is with the width of the streets and the area that's owned to put the guard arms in there, and then to, going back to the other slide, if there's a need for a median, which the preferred thing sometimes is to have a median in there. And again, you've got the calculations, there's different points for different things, but if you're trying to get the most points, the safest alternative is always to have a median with the gates up there. You don't have the ability, so here's where a median would be in here, and if you look at the length of what the medians need to be, these can extend in, you put another one in, and it starts to, oops, let me go back. You run into, again, I'm just going to focus on the width of East Street just is prohibitive for putting in the necessary equipment to make the calculations that you would need to do from them.
Isn't the speed of the train also?
The speed of the train has a component to it. It's part of the calculation.
Because you're always going to be going 10 miles an hour. In Acton, there are currently 29 quiet zones in Massachusetts as of October 15th. And I personally am familiar with a couple other ones. And those have, I don't know like any particular fancy kind of names, but like the commuter rail way out through those intersections surrounded by cars. And we're talking about a 10-mile-an-hour little train going through. But so that's why I'm confused about why it's so
I think you more than most here, you've had a chance to look at that, you've gone to the thing, you see there's a point system that's tied into it, it's tied into engineering analysis. It comes back to the engineers looking at this, the engineers looking at the speed of the train, looking at the distance, the sight lines. Sight lines you didn't mention. Sight lines are an important part of here. You have no sight line coming in off of northbound on 140. There is no sight line on the East Street for that because it's a straight just turnaround there. So you get negative points, or you can't take points for that. So all of those things add up, and if you had two-way traffic in there, then that complicates things. So all we're saying is that when you look at alternatives A and B, We don't believe that a quiet zone could be designed, or you could meet the criteria for alternatives A or B.
How
We
would
think-
you use some of the property in that intersection?
How would you use it?
Like if you made the closed space bigger, but didn't change the road to one way?
Well, there's only so much land we own. We can't make it bigger because we only own a certain space in there. The road is only so far, and you've got the building right down there that's right on the edge of the road. You've got the wall of the dwelling shop, the shop that's right on the road. There's no width. There's no space to expand the road. The road is, as it shows there, 24 feet, and the road's 24 feet. It's not like you got 32 or 36, or on Waterville Street, you've got 44 Street, 44 feet. That roadway you can fit stuff in. When you only have a 22-foot roadway, you can't make it any wider. And that's our challenge that we have there.
So relative to what you just said, Ray Street is narrower than East Street. So you can make all the modifications you want to East Street. Are you going to make Ray Street a quiet zone?
The Ray Street would be part of the quiet zone too.
But do you not have enough room to put in all the equipment?
On Ray Street you do, because Ray Street is just it's a right angle intersection to the thing. You have the width there to do that. It's the mechanical stuff that you got to fit in. Here you don't have the way to put the mechanical stuff in.
The road's too wide.
East Street's too narrow.
So, sir, on this scenario here, how many gates are there?
Excuse me?
How many gates are on this scenario you have up on the board right now?
In this scenario right here, based upon alternative A, okay, this would have two gates on Waterville Street and 2 gates on East Street. I'm sorry, this is
That's not
showing
alternative
alternative C. If this was 2-way on East Street, it would have 2 gates there.
Sir, the picture that's up on the screen right now that we're all looking at, can you tell me how many gates are on the picture on the screen right now?
I can't, because we haven't designed that yet, because that's a whole long process to go through. And let me explain, it's a whole process to go through to see how you would meet those requirements.
So, but with the one you have up right now, it's showing East Street as a one-way, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe I'm wrong, but by making East Street one-way, does that make it so you don't need a gate on the right side of the tracks on East Street? Because there'd be no traffic ever coming that way if you made it a one-way, is that correct?
So on East Street, it would be tightened so that you would only have one lane going through there.
Right, so the question is, would a gate need to be installed on the right-hand side of East Street if it was a one-way?
So on East Street, I believe you would need to have, let's see, you got the sidewalk, you need a gate for the sidewalk on both sides, plus you'd need a main gate. I think on East Street, I believe it'd have 3 gates, 1 big one and 2 sidewalk gates.
Okay, so if the roads were kept the way they currently are,
There's only one sidewalk on each.
would the...
There's going to be one on both sides, so you don't have people walking each side of the train. That's why you would have the sidewalk as
So if the road...
traffic. If it's one way, you know the way the traffic's coming, so you only need 1 gate there, and you wouldn't have traffic come the other way if it's 1 gate way. But if pedestrians can walk both sides of the sidewalk, so you need 1 on each side.
So if we kept the roadways in the current direction of travel, East Street being 2-way, the railroad would have to install a 4th gate to stop traffic from entering the intersection from Institute Road or Harrison Road, however you want to look at it. Is that accurate? You would have to stop traffic from traveling down East Street to the intersection of 140 and Route 30. Is that correct?
You
Or
say
do we
put
not
the
care
gate
about those people?
further back up the road?
I don't know. Where are you going to put it? If the scenario stays the same, you need to stop traffic on East Street, correct?
Yep.
So if we leave it the way it is, where is your design to stop traffic from coming down East Street into Route 30 and 140? That is what I'm asking you. Because
Sure.
it seems to me that one scenario, when it goes one way, the railroad installs 3 gates. But it seems to me that if we keep it, the roads in the current traveling patterns, we need to go to 4 gates, and the railroad would then have to upkeep an additional gate.
No, actually, if we're making it a quiet zone, we'd be installing.
No, I'm not talking about a quiet zone. I didn't say that, don't make a quiet zone come out of my mouth.
Hold on.
I didn't say a quiet zone.
Okay. So if we had East Street being two-way,
Correct.
what would we have on there? We'd probably have 2 gates.
So you'd have 4 gates.
2 on East and 2 on Waterville Street.
Correct.
Yes.
Harmony. That's the,
That's what it was years ago.
So one other thing is that, and I just want to bring this up as part of the discussion,
I don't know, I think.
is we had applied for a Chrissy grant, which would come in and allow us to do more upgrades throughout Grafton and Upton, and also putting on a new main up on the main, can't get to it, I thought I had it here. It'd be putting in a new parallel track up on Westboro Street.
It's at the bottom of that last slide.
That's the bottom slide.
I just have one question back on the scenarios with the gate.
Go back.
One more.
So what you're saying is the other way. In scenario A, scenario B, and scenario C, the number of gates would essentially be the same.
Oh, yeah. You got there.
No.
I'm sorry, I really,
when he goes one way, he only needs 3 gates.
3 gates, but it would be 4 for scenario A and B.
Correct.
yeah.
Which the upkeep of gates yearly, annually are exorbitant amount.
Okay. Can you go ask your question again? Because I want to make sure
I
that
just
we're
want
not
to
getting...
clarify the number of gates
Yep.
for each scenario. So there would be 4 for A, 4 for B, and 3 for C.
Okay. So I think someone's trying to make a case that the railroad's not going to have to build a gate. Okay, let's just get that out on the table because that's what I think I heard over here. All right. These gates are funded by the federal and the state government. Okay. We're paying 10 cents on the dollar. All right. So whether we're building 4 gates or 1 gate, it's not going to break the railroad's bank. I'm not going to lose money over 1 or 4. It doesn't matter to
You
me
can't
what
take
the
that
number
money
is.
and use it somewhere else.
What I am concerned about, as I've said before here, is making sure that it operates safe and effective, and then giving the town a choice as to whether you like A, B, or C. I mean, A's coming, do you like B or C? And
You've got
B,
the town right here, our neighborhood. This is our town.
yep,
Hey, well, I have two questions also into that. If there's no space now for gates, for you know, that you have to make space by closing the road for 3 gates. Why is it any, I mean, where are you going to put the 4 gates?
well, when I was talking about 3 gates though, remember though that 2 of them were for the sidewalk that
Yeah.
are tied into there. I don't have the big gate coming down to close the roadway. I don't have, the issue with gates, you get 2 big gates coming down, people will go around the gate and go through. That's why you have the median there. If I don't have a median, then I'm stuck with 4 gates.
Okay.
Okay, the median allows you to do 2 gates, because you can't drive through. You know,
And then in scenario C, is there a guarantee that if scenario C would come about, that would guarantee the quiet time? Or is that still up in the air, or would that cause additional funding that the town would have to front to make those changes?
So I can't guarantee that, so I'm going to be up clear. I can pretty much guarantee it's not going to work for A or B, because that's what our engineers have told us. C, I'm told it can work. There's still, as the young lady up here said, there's a very detailed analysis you have to go through to do that, and that costs a lot of money to go through to do that. And if there's not a will to look at that, why would we go down that long process of looking at that to come back with a definitive answer with FRA approval to get that certified, only to be told these residents don't want that? And again, you have to remember what the town's hearing. They're getting complaints about the horn. The horn's not going to stop unless there's a no whistle zone. That's the only option that's there. The horn's
can't
never
make
going to
it
stop
so.
unless there's a
But
no whistle
this
zone.
wouldn't affect any of the horns from the stations, going to the train station, or you know,
On the main line, no, that doesn't
No.
affect
Okay,
anything
so you still
there.
hear
So
it.
when they're going by at 50 miles an hour, you know, that's always going to continue. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment on the rerouting of the traffic in the city.
Yep.
I drive all around Grafton, and I've taken every single one of these streets, because I've lived here all my life. And we've had to reroute the traffic because of all the things that have been going on Waterville Street for the past past 6 months. And when I come to Harrison Avenue, say I'm coming up East Street, and I'm going to take a right onto Harrison, first of all, it's a lot of kids there. You have to travel very slow. And if you've got an SUV coming out of Harrison Ave going this way, I have to wait before I can go in there. So if you've got all this traffic going through there, it's going to be, that's Harrison, that's Prospect Street. That's what I meant, was Prospect Street.
Yes.
You go up Harrison, down Harrison and up Ray Street, if you can get out of that street, good luck.
And then you get a little
So if you've
snow.
got a whole line of traffic, it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be a nightmare there, it's going to be a nightmare on Prospect Street, you gotta go through the, you're gonna have cars cutting down through the parking lot of the church. It's going to be a mess. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Now, and I'm not debating any of that, and I'm not trying to, again, advocate for one of the
No, I know
alternatives.
that, I know.
I just want to say that in the traffic report, it does calculate what they estimate some of the numbers of cars are going to be going in those roadways.
Did they actually drive it and through all these circumstances when
Well, they-
someone's coming out and someone's going in?
Yeah, I mean, they drove it, they know it, they modeled it. Is the model 100% accurate? No model is. It's the best that engineering
Yeah, no, and I
firms
understand that, but believe me, you can't go down that Prospect Street very fast.
I am not
There's
saying you
There's
can.
animals, that, you know, I mean, you just gotta be very, very careful on that. So if you like double or triple the traffic.
I did a breakdown of that.
Yeah, I know, I just
Okay,
saw
cool,
that.
Yeah, cool.
Yes,
But
go
I-
ahead. I know you put some stuff, you want to talk about that?
All right, so I talk loud. If anybody has this in front of them, great, I'll also send it to Mr. McInerney and we can, it'll be published. So on that traffic study, there was 684 trips coming up East Street westbound to the intersection. If they close, I live in the corner, I live at 13 East Street, which is the corner of East and Prospect. So if they were to close it at my house, you either have to go right on Prospect or you have to go left on Harrison. So you're taking 684 trips a day, say you give half to me, half to Harrison Ave. That's almost a 4-time increase in traffic on Harrison Ave to Ray Street. And yeah, you're coming up the hill by the pub trying to get out, you're either gonna cut somebody off and cause a traffic issue, or just wait there all night. There's no traffic signal there. Take a right on Prospect, that'll increase traffic on my road 3 times, which I didn't, I have a 3-year-old, I didn't move back to Grafton on a quiet little road, so my daughter can ride her bike on the highway. So you go down Prospect Street, you take a dog leg left at Alvin's house, and then you get out by St. Mary's Church, the same problem, you have no light to help you, you're gonna cut somebody off. I understand cutting 2 cycles down to 3 is great, but that traffic's not gonna move when people are constantly taking the lane and cutting you off. So, for all the people who want to go through Waterville Street quicker and all the commuters and they all want to get home, that's great. I don't think that, if there's somebody in the room, that's great. I'm not saying you're not entitled to your opinion. Everything I hear, obviously I'm selfishly here because I don't want alternative C, because I don't want all the traffic through the neighborhood. And it seems like that's kind of resonated in the room. So we do see a benefit of alternative C as far as traffic going through Route 30. And those folks are deciding to come here too and say, I really want it. Every meeting I've been to on this, I haven't seen any of this. So, that's my 2 cents. I'll email this to you so you have it and I'll send it to you.
And
Well,
I don't
excuse me,
disagree.
excuse me, but do you think on Prospect and Harrison, do you think you're gonna have 2 cars going 2 different ways on that at one time?
No, I live there now,
No.
absolutely.
You can't even do it now, and what do you think it's gonna be when you shut off East Street?
So I thank you for that presentation. I think it was accurate information, based upon your feelings and what you reviewed for data. There certainly would be increased traffic on those streets. What the numbers will be, who knows? It will be more. And, again, that's the quandary that everybody's in right now is people that live there are going to have an impact. If we want to call them the commuters, we'll love it. And that's why we're just giving the town the option and saying, here's, B and C in addition to A, for you guys to take a look at if you want. Yes, sir.
I have one question through you to the operation
Yes.
individual.
Yep.
How many trains do you bring to Washington Mills?
How many?
Yeah,
It's different every
Per day.
per day. It's different every day. It all depends on what the volume is, because they do truck
So then by federal law, you do have to sound the horn, correct?
when we go down there, yeah.
Because to keep people off the track or get out of the way if something's coming.
Yep.
And that includes even with a gate. You still have to do it because you have to warn people that you're coming,
Yep.
even with a gate.
With A, B, and C, you're going to have to use the horn unless with option C, the town goes forward and applies for a no horn zone. Then you wouldn't have to use the horn through to Washington Mills. You wouldn't have to do that.
You would have to be certain. You would because,
It is not a
because
silent zone,
the,
it's a quiet zone.
Right. So let me just emphasize that. It's if there's somebody in the tracks, if there's any type of danger, the horn's coming now. Okay? It's not that the horn goes off, it's just
yeah,
that
you
you don't
can't stop
have
on a
to.
dime for an individual.
Right. You don't have to use the horn with the quiet zone. But if there's any
It's a
danger,
blinded
then you
area.
still would use the horn.
When you go down.
Can I- I'm gonna get this lady over here.
This
Yes,
is
ma'am.
all about the horn, right? You go down Snow Road, you blow the horn, the required amount of times. When you go Carroll Road, you blow the amount of times. When you're on Waterville Street, you're backing up 4 times, 3 times, you're blowing the horn, sometimes 40 times. And I've written you a number of times about it, and nothing's happened. So just so I can sleep tonight, do you have the right to use Waterville Street and East Street as your depot?
So again, that is not the question. We have
That's
the
my
right
question.
to, well,
That's my
I'm not answering your question because your question, we have a right to operate the railroad. We're using our right of way to do it. We're crossing that as many times as we need to do to operate our railroad.
There's
We're
no
only
other
using
place
it the
in town
minimum
you
number
blow
of
the horn
times.
That many times.
I've been hearing your comments for years, the 3 years that I've been here. I know you're feeling on this, you're very consistent. You don't want the railroad there, I understand that, but we're here, and we're not leaving. And you don't have a box to check to say no railroad.
All I
And-
want to
and I'm
know is
giving-
you have the right because I'm
But,
leaving.
but I'm giving you the, we're giving you an
can't do
option.
anything, the town does nothing, the railroad gets what they want.
Again,
It's as simple as that.
I disagree,
The people are
because you
out
know
of
what?
control.
We're giving you an
You've
option,
destroyed
alternative
this end
C,
of town
to
from
get
the
rid
very
of the
beginning
horns
you
if
came
you
in.
want to go through the process of C.
Let's go, Gloria. I'm
It's an option there. Yes, ma'am.
Is what you have so far an
Don't forget, pay
absolute
your taxes now.
definitive statement that required?
From our engineering standpoint, that's the only alternative they have given us from there, because at the end of the day, we have to design it, then it has to go through the process that's here with the town spearheading this application piece.
But does the FRA lady say that that is absolutely?
We don't have any design for them to look at, they need a full design package before she can comment yes or no. I mean, all she can do is give the regulations.
If there was some way to not make it, then you could have.
Can I just say this? I wish there was an option D. Tim wishes there was an option D that said, let's keep East Street two-way and let's have a no horn zone. There's no option D because we can't design one.
But is there, I mean, couldn't you buy where the properties on the corner, to open it up?
I mean, okay, so to answer that question, and here's what I'm going to say on that.
Tim, can I get a feel for you as far as your thoughts on making East Street one way?
Just before you answer that, Dan, let me just finish this question here. I mean, the only thing that possibly could happen is, and again, this is 2 commercial buildings. If this dwelling shop, which is the storefront in the building there, was purchased, then you could redo the whole intersection. You put a rotary there, you know, and then you have the small manufacturing building under the bottom where it says East Street, which makes it too tight. If those 2 buildings weren't there, then we don't have 22 feet or 24 feet. Then we could have 44 feet and do a lot. But that would be a plan D. We didn't show a plan D because that's an eminent domain, that's $1 million, that's a whatever. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll just answer this, I think it's important, but let me just go to Mr. Flynn for 1 second. We're here because we know we get complaints about the knuckling of the trains, the horns, the diesel fuel, the trains running at night. They built the house, they're not in the house yet, get in the house so they don't listen to the train. we're here to listen to you all, to tell us you don't want, I hear a lot of clear, you don't want to see, all right. You don't want to see, we're going to be stuck with those horns unless we do an eminent domain taking and make the road wider so we can get more gates in there so we can make applications for the FRA and get it wider. Somebody else is paying for this, so we were trying to get your input. I have to pay an engineer to counterbalance their report from their traffic engineer. I don't want to spend that money until I know he'll want to do something. So I'm not spending any money. He doesn't want to hear that because he wants to move along. But I can't do it. You are going to have development along Route 30. That's why they put that conduit bank in there for National Grid. That's why we put the sanitary sewer. That's all going to happen. That's going to come to that intersection eventually.
Perhaps. You have Syntec Boulevard.
Route 30 on the right across Manzio's is 40 acres, which is mass development land, which will be a biomanufacturing.
You can turn right or turn left, but that's not.
That's correct. But
my question is, what is your opinion on the one-way?
My opinion is a good idea.
To turn it on one-way?
Yes.
Yeah,
If it works.
What's the opinion of the superintendent?
A quiet zone.
What's the opinion of the superintendent of school buses with that being one-way?
I don't think there is a superintendent of school buses, but
Superintendent of schools. I'm sorry, I thought you would understand I was talking about school buses.
I got you. I don't know what Jay's opinion is of that. They would make it work one way or the other. We have to make it work. But this is the beginning, right? We're at the embryonic stage of making a decision. If we don't get out of the embryo, we don't make a decision. We keep it the way it is. There's nothing, we're not doing anything except asking for your input. And you're slinging at us like we're doing something to harm you.
No, we're trying to, like everything else.
Yeah, everything else, we're here with you, asking you what you think. We hear you. You don't want C. Right?
I think the biggest thing too is with C is you are just not looking at the impact it's going to make on the roads with no lights but having all these people getting in there.
We can hear you say, tell us it's too narrow, there's too much traffic. We get it.
Slinging stuff at us, I just talked to you for the first time here tonight. So us meaning, are you part of the railroad?
Yeah. I would want this meeting to take input from the community so they would know what they should do in terms of their design and what I should do to counterbalance, make sure that
nobody was slinging anything at you, so I don't know why you
keep in mind that, you know,
I
Tim
can
as
sense a little
being
bit.
the
I'm
town...
sorry if I overreacted, but I can sense
Tim
it
being the town
directly.
administrator has to represent the entire town.
Right.
And he's giving you his perspective on the
I
entire
apologize.
town. And I would just ask everybody to respect that, just like I'm giving you the perspective on what the railroad's doing. And it has, again, B and C have no benefit to the railroad more than A does. Tim's giving his analysis for the whole town, and that's why we're trying to take a look at this.
Want to get to her?
So, yeah, I believe that the railroad is doing this presentation tonight because they want to know how many gates they have to buy. They're doing this regardless. It needs to be done. It's legal. You're going about it the right way. You need to have the safety gates down. They've got to be installed. They want to know how many they want to buy. This is why we're here.
Yep.
So from what I hear, nobody wants to do Plan C. Can we vote? Is that correct?
Yeah. Did you have a different question?
And even if we do Plan C, we're not guaranteed that we're getting a quiet.
Let me just say just
Is
two
that
words.
correct? Am I right so far?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
Well, just 1 second. Jennifer Thomas, I am the chair of the select board right now. The reason we wanted to have this meeting is exactly this. We want to get your input because this decision came before the board. And I was not comfortable making a decision about making East Street one way or not without getting the input of the neighborhood. From what I'm hearing here tonight, nobody really wants East Street to be a one-way, so we certainly can do a show of hands. I don't have an opinion either way. I want to, I want to do what's right for the neighborhood. So the idea is to get your input. So if nobody wants option C, we can take it off the table, or my vote would be to take it off the table right now. We have, Donna Stock is here as well, so you have 2 representatives. But the whole idea, the board, Doreen is out of town, but we wanted to get your input to make a decision on it.
However,
if nobody wants option C, tell us now. That's great. That's why we're here. We want to get your input on it.
There's one piece of information that you should know before you make a
Stand up so we
decision.
can hear you.
There's one piece of information that you should know before, so that you're informed, before you make that decision. If you decide you want to proceed with a quiet zone, a one-way street is a pretty big number in the calculator, okay? Because you're closing something. It's like if you were doing 6 streets and they all went in the same place and you could close one of those crossings, that's an enormous number in the calculator because you're eliminating a huge risk. You don't have a crossing anymore. The safest crossing is no crossing. So, you know, when you do something like that, where you put in quad gates, which are the most, you know, up-to-date, most efficient gates that they have, they block off the street. Then you don't need the median down the middle of the street so that they can't traverse around the gates, which is why you have the median, because people tend to do that. They don't wait for the train. And if there's no train horn, you're eliminating a safety mechanism. And it's required by federal law that that is sounded. 2 long, 1 short, 1 long. So when they're switching out here, they're not trying to annoy anybody. They're just obeying the law. 2 long, 1 short, 1 long.
Thank you. Sir, can I get your, oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Requesting that at this point, I think we've gotten quite even. I don't think we're going to make any headway any further. I think everybody has an opinion as to whether they want A, B, or C. Can we just vote? And then the select people will know what the opinion of the majority of the people in this room is.
And then the selectmen could, at their choice, take it up at their next meeting and vote the whole board, so they can direct what they need to do. And, but again, they're getting input tonight. Because they don't have a posted meeting, they can't take an official vote and do that.
No, they can go home with
But everybody else can,
They're gonna
yes, they can do
represent
that.
Have your meeting.
Sir, you had a question way back?
What is it? No whistles at all, or best effort to make no whistles? What does that mean?
So I think we started to say that before. There's no need to blow the whistles unless there's a sense of emergency or safety issue. So by having a no-whistle zone, the gates will come down, the gates will have the little bells on them. They'll go down, the train can go through, the train can go back. You don't have to blow the whistles. Car creeps up. There's a bell on the locomotive that rings as it goes through. You probably heard those before, so it's bells that go through. So there is a sound, but it's not the horn. Obviously, if there's somebody on the tracks, a car tries to encroach, there's a safety thing of an issue, then the horn will blow. So it's not like it never will blow. I live next to a quiet zone, and I may hear a horn blow once a month, and it's usually something like that. It might be a deer that runs in the tracks.
But
It's still at a safety discretion.
it is an engineer's sole discretion whether or not he or she blows the train horn in an emergency.
So it would have to be, I believe, at least a half a mile long. So I would say that if we went through the design would take us from our interchange at Westboro Street through 30, through East Street, through Ray Street. And at least those 4 would be it. Whether we have to go further than that, we haven't got that far, because this is where the focus is right now at this intersection. And again, you know, I respect everybody that lives here in the neighborhood, and as I said in the beginning, traffic will be rerouted with option C, and there will be impacts in them. This gentleman articulated very well. You know, but that's the only way we think that no horn zone can be. So where the town's getting calls on the horns, this was an option. If this option's taken off the table, then the horns will continue. And probably when you get a call to the selectmen, they're going to come back and say, we looked at that option and it was decided not to do that, so nothing I can do about it. And it's a federal law requirement. It's not a choice.
So when you do the coupling,
Wait, can we finish this one? Yes, sir?
if we did option C, when would it start and when would it come?
So if we did option C, we'd have to have the crossing gates in and the geometric improvement. We would be moving that forward and get that done by June 30th. The timing to go through the calculation to do that and the engineering of that, is that a 6, 12-month process?
All depends on your engineering.
Okay. So I can't give you a hard date on that. We move forward as quickly as we can.
Each street would be changed in about a year, and then the town would have to go through the process of establishing a quiet zone. Which
Correct.
would take an additional 12 months after it's completed.
I would hope it's not that long. I would hope it's not long. And as Tim said before, this is an opportunity, Tim's got a budget to manage. And this is an opportunity that says, I got an intersection that's a mess already. And if I can have them, meaning me, meaning the feds and the state, pay for it, and he and the Board of Selectmen don't have to pay for it, that's why we're having these robust discussions.
Something else that you should know is, as people who are footing the bill here, okay? Normally, you cannot get federal funds to establish a quiet zone, okay? We're starting to look at that, the FRA is, at a national level, because obviously communities that have more money can afford to get the quiet zone, and communities that have less money, it's a little more difficult. So, depending on how complicated it is, and quiet zones are complicated. Every single one is different. It's not a cookie cutter thing, because no two towns are the same. So, you, in this instance, are going to be able to tag on to some Chrissy grant money, because the railroad has that. Normally, railroads are not in favor of quiet zones. Honestly, this is the first time I've ever been at a meeting where a railroad is trying to help a community establish a quiet zone, because usually they are opposed to it. So the fact that they're working with you is a little different than I've ever seen.
There's an observation I just had, and Carmen left, but the horns are a symptom of a bigger problem, right? Those cars going back and forth and coupling, and they have to blow the horn every time that happens. If that didn't happen, it would be less. So it's just a symptom of a bigger issue. So this siding, we're gonna get to and try to find that. That's the solution to deal with that symptomatic problem.
It's not a complete solution, but it'll
It's
help.
not 20 on blows, it's now 12. You know what I mean?
Well, what it also does is it eliminates the 1 a.m. delivery, which is what you get.
11, it's not 1, it's 11 o'clock, between 11 and 11:30, every frickin' Friday, Saturday, and Thursday. It's at 11.
We don't have anything on Saturday.
Wakes me up every day. I can tape it, I can videotape it, I have it on tape, it's
All right,
all
but
over the place.
what's
It's
the
not
solution?
one.
Tell me what the solution is.
So what you're saying is true, Tim, but they still have to come up to that switch to get to that lower set of tracks you can.
So what
So
the
regardless
other
of
piece
how
of
the
design
siding, they'll
was,
have to
is
come up
that
this
we'd be
spot.
putting a Y and connecting and building a new parallel third track on the main line. And what would happen?
Just tell me, in my mind, what is the main one? What do you say main line? What do you say?
CSX line.
Layman language.
This is as simple as I could do it, and I think people start to get it. Our rail cars, and I'm going to speak from the bottom here, come from Selkirk, which is point A off to the left. Selkirk, New York is where our rail cars come. They come past us, drive through Worcester, and go all the way to Framingham. Okay, so we can see them on the main line, which is where the main track is, the Worcester main line, right up on Westboro Street. We see our cars going. They're dropped off at Framingham. A day later, they're reloaded. And they go back to Worcester. And we wave to them going back to Worcester. Then in Worcester, they're reloaded, sometimes the same night, sometimes the next night. And then they come back to us and stop at point C, which is the G&U. They come in and they're delivered, Sunday through Thursday? Sunday night through Thursday night is when they're delivered, whether it's 11:30 or 1:30, it's at that time of the night. And they're dropped off at our main yard. They have to go through what's called air brake testing. It takes them a while. You get the clanking going on. They pick up the empty cars, and then they go back to Framingham. And then they go back to Selkirk, and we wave bye to them again. See ya. What we're looking to do with this federal grant is to build this new siding, which the selectmen have supported, because it lessens the impact, doesn't eliminate, lessens some of the noise impacts, because the train coming from Selkirk, the one that goes to Framingham, goes by in the afternoon, daylight hours. So what we would have there is they'd be able to get off right by the bridge where 140 is, a little switch, for 9/10 of a mile, they'd be able to put the rail cars there, drop them off. Ours would be at the end of the line of the rail cars because they'd be stacked that way in Selkirk. They disconnect the last 20, 30 cars and they drive to Framingham. We then pull those cars off of the main line because we can pull from 2 different directions and build our trains up near that end of the yard versus down further where we are.
But when? What time of day would you do that?
During the day. That would be in the afternoon.
So are you
And
saying?
then what we would do is we then put our empty cars out there, so when that train goes back to Selkirk, it goes past us a little bit, where the bridge is a 140, backs down our side, and connects to them, and then heads straight out. And that all happens during the daylight time. When the cars are delivered from CSX at night, we're not switching them then. They drop them off and they take out. 6 a.m. the next morning, then we start doing our rail work yard at 6, 7 in the morning, switching the cars on the yard that's there. So that is a grant that the selectmen unanimously supported. We have letters of support from MBTA, from your state rep, from Mass DOT, from CSX. It makes a lot of sense to do that. That's another piece that will have less of an impact in the future. And your follow-up question?
So does that mean that the trains won't have to backtrack and pick up another car and go forward again and
Use
backtrack?
North Grafton
No, they're still
Street.
gonna have to use.
No, that's just the propane they're talking about,
no
right?
benefit.
There'll still be some switching. It'll still come down to Washington Mills and back. It just won't be as much. It'll be more on that end of the yard. Because think about it too, is when we have our tracks, we also have our empties ready to be taken out. They're in the way. If those are out on the main line or on that thing, they're not in our way anymore. We can switch on those tracks up there. But I don't want anyone to leave here saying, with that, there's never going to be a loading down to Washington Mills and crossing there. There's still going to be, there's just going to be less of a need for it because we'll be able to do that at the northern part of the yard, which is why the selectmen were in support of that.
So you
Yes,
say
sir.
that's going to happen, but that's independent of any of these other traffic systems.
That's independent of A, B, and C. It's all
And I have a
over,
quick
baby.
follow-up to that area, and the gates that exist there on Westboro Road, those would be compliant to the quiet zone, right? Without a median or anything there.
I can't answer that. So we might have to put a median in there. We're going to have to make some.
So that would have to change to create the quiet zone.
There may have to be something that's done. But you've got the infrastructure there to add to it. It would be an add, and more importantly, as we talked down here, we got 24 feet. We got more width there. So we can add something.
So what were you just saying, talking about with the main line part, that would eliminate all that nighttime?
That is designed, okay, I never want to give an absolute because CSX can change whatever. That, based upon everything we know today, based upon what CSX has told us, based upon our design, based upon feedback from MBTA, Mass DOT, FRA, that would limit the nighttime deliveries and pickups. Yes,
Let me
sir.
ask you a question.
Let me just finish with him. Yes, sir.
Has it been designed, do we know exactly where this turnoff, this drop-off zone is going to be? Is it going to be in Grafton, Westboro, Framingham? Where's it going to be?
It's good. What drop-off zone?
That you're talking about now?
Oh, the siding, okay. Visualize right at, it would be, we got 2 tracks running on Westboro Street right now. Okay?
You go all the
The
way to
switch would start right after the bridge on this side where 140 is. So the bridge, you go over the tracks, Route 140. We put that switch right there.
Yeah.
That would run in front of our piece, down to past where the stream is, and then it would switch back in.
So you're now, instead of,
You're moving the noise of the knuckle.
I understand the noise, and in a lot of ways, I'm much more in favor of this because I don't like getting woken up at 11 o'clock every night. But have you asked the neighbors that they're interested in putting 30,000 gallons worth of liquid propane in the backyard?
We're not leaking, so.
I know you're not leaking, but it is still 30,000 gallons of liquid propane in a backyard less than 50 feet from their yard house.
Okay. So,
Okay? And now you're talking 20 or 30 of them, which you already have in your yard right now, but it's not protected by the fire protection system.
actually, in the yard right now, we have 8. But we're not leaving any cars out on the main line. It's a switching track. Cars are dropped off, they're moved into our yard the same day. The cars are still going to be stored in our yard, ready to go into the propane facility,
Right, 20.
along with every other chemical
Right.
that we move and every other chemical that zips at 50 miles an hour on the main line.
So
That's
these
how our
gas
economy
dealers
survives
are
with
sitting there
moving
with
chemicals and
30,000 gallons
commodities back
of
and
liquid
forth.
propane in their backyards.
So, again,
And how do you get that eminent domain to put in the third rail? Are you taking their backyard?
no. Okay,
Whose third rail are you taking?
we're not taking
It's
anybody's
in
third
between
rail.
the street of Westboro Road and the CSX line. So if you had the back, the propane tanks that you got back, you visualize that, there'll be a siding in front of you before the next
20 cars
CSX
lengths,
line.
that's gonna go all
Okay.
the way down to,
Yeah, I don't know, a lot
it's
of.
gonna go to top.
It'll be
It
long.
is not, no,
So
let
Tim-
me, listen.
Tim-
There used to be 3 and 4 rail lines running through there. There's 2.
Yeah.
This is all within the existing right-of-way of the MBTA, the CSX main line. There's no eminent domain taking for the main line. It already exists. It's just putting the track that used to be there, we're putting it back in. The track is going to be 9/10 of a mile. Go on Google, start at the bridge going over 130 in the track, 140 in the tracks,
Yeah.
measure off 9/10 of a mile, and that's where it's going to end. It's not at Tufts.
So Tim, getting back
Where is it?
to, Westboro.
Parmental Road is where it's going to end.
Go ahead, Mr. Boyd.
Yes, sir.
Hold on.
Getting back to Westboro Road, that would be, so I believe the meaning here is to pick out a scenario and to find out the feedback of all the scenarios. So if we're trying to get a quiet zone, that quiet zone has to be a half mile of track, correct?
I think-
Correct. Yes,
Okay,
half mile.
so we said that that's gonna start next to CSX at Westboro Road.
Correct.
So what was just brought up is that, in order for that, potentially, we don't have engineering yet, but in order for that track to be accepted to be part of the quiet zone, we would have to then put a median in at Westboro Road. Correct?
I said possibly we'd have to look at the design of it.
Okay.
And we have the width
So
of
we have
Westboro
18
Road, which we don't have
So
on the
as you
street.
know, you have 18-wheelers coming down Westboro Road, turning left into your facility. They would then be driving over or around the median to make that left-hand turn?
Well, how do you think they would be able to do that? Don't you think the engineers would be able to put that median in so the trucks would be able to take a left-hand turn there?
I don't know.
I
That's why
would
I'm
think
asking.
that an engineer would be able to do that without allowing the trucks to make a left-hand turn.
So, I don't know, that's why I'm
Well,
asking.
I'm just, I mean, it's an obvious design issue that the engineers would have to work
I
through.
was asking Tim, if that wasn't a viable option, then it seems to me that the quiet zone scenario is probably off the table. Because as you just said, the engineering's in there to make that happen.
It sounds like the quiet zone is off the table because people don't want the street to be one way.
A
But
quiet
there's other
zone
reasons. that-
doesn't
that-
always have to have a median at every street. Okay? Doesn't.
Okay, so what would that look like if it didn't have a median? Because what was presented to us is it almost was told to us that in order to have a quiet zone, you have to have a median. Maybe that was my opinion of what was presented.
We didn't say that every crossing has to have a median. The preferred method is to have a median. Not every crossing designs for that.
So we could
Because
have
it's
a quiet
safer.
zone without medians.
You could, in certain circumstances, if it met the criteria.
Right.
And
You could.
from a Westboro Street, is that we'd have to look at the design of how that would happen. Our challenge going back to East Street is it's only 24 feet, and you don't have width without taking those two
You
buildings
don't
to
have
modify
24
that.
street, you don't have 24 feet at Westboro Road either, on a wall that's caving in under the road. So,
Where the gate is,
It's width, it's not length.
width, that's what I'm talking about.
where the gate is,
Yes,
it's not 24 feet.
on the downward side where the wall is collapsing?
No,
Yeah, but that's not where the crossing is. The crossing's at the top of the hill, past the entrance of the...
And how
of
far
the
back is
facility.
the median? What are you gonna put, a 2-foot median in?
There's room there. I don't understand why you're focused on that, because we have width, we can widen that, we have flexibility there.
And then you
We
need,
don't have
what is the length of a median? So you only need like a 2-foot length median? Or does
I'm
it
not
need
an
to go back
engineer,
like
we're
2
not going to
feet?
design that. Could it be designed? We believe, and we've been told that it could. That's all I can say, more than that.
generally 60 to 100.
Well, we're talking about those trucks. You guys must know this. The propane trucks have been going all through any side street to leave there. Is that right?
So, I mean, we know that many of the roads have been closed, and we know that that may have rerouted some traffic. The trucks are told what roads to go on. Once they leave the site, they have federal protection to go on any street they want to. We tell them which way to go. We have right-hand turns for them to leave. Normally, they follow all of the rules, but let's face it, we've all been going through these road closures for the last 9, 12 months. Things are happening.
Yeah, they go right through any side street, whatever.
They're going down North Main.
Yes, sir.
The gentleman brought that up about the trucks. I watched the propane truck go down North Main Street to 140. You know what I mean?
I'm sorry, you went to what?
You're going down North Main Street, you leave your facility, you take a left.
Yep.
Go down North Main Street. Where North Main Street comes in to 140.
Yep.
The sleeper on that truck. Explain to me how that guy can see traffic coming down 140 when he's coming out on an intersection like that. I watched them pull out the other day. 2 cars had to slam on their brakes so they didn't run into the back. Why are they going out that way?
Nothing's going to happen.
Are they supposed to go out to the left? I mean, to the right when they leave the...
They are,
As I said before, they're required to go out to the right and go back out at 30 to get to the guys.
I try to rezone them so they can.
It's crazy when you got to set up a bridge like that, they were going to take it right out. They were supposed to go out 30, there's 20 that way.
I'm not a truck driver, we told them what to do. You know, if they're
It's
breaking the rules.
not going to take away, but we can pull it over, but we would be breaking a federal law by pulling it over. So we are handcuffed. Until that road gets complete.
So it's just like a bad intersection, you gotta wait until something gets killed and do something about it. Now they go up the hill and they take a right by the barber shop. And I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, the 36-ton bridge signs have just gone. They're just gone.
Hey, Jay told me that today. When I'm coming southbound, I see it, but I haven't seen it. I haven't looked for it.
If a truck driver is,
They don't take it right,
Yeah.
there's no signs anymore.
but here's what I'm saying, that if a truck driver is going over a bridge that isn't properly rated, they're gonna get cited.
Who would care? We're all gone then.
Well,
Tim, it's a free for all. I know people that have called the chief on that. Nothing's been done.
Listen, I will talk to the chief tomorrow about enforcement and just being out there when they're there. We have the
Try 6 o'clock, 6:15, and
We're trying to
6:30.
make that intersection better. There was a cop down there. When you go down there at 4 or 5 o'clock,
Which
yellow
intersection? Hold on,
means
which intersection? So I know what you're talking about.
Waterville Street.
Okay.
Yellow means nail it because it's going to change. They all line up, and then the next people can't get out. And then they do the same thing. You need to put a cop down there and ticket anybody that gets stuck out in the intersection.
so I've heard from the chief, he's mentioned this before, that they have pulled over truck drivers for doing things they shouldn't be doing, and he's taking appropriate action. But just like all of you, I'm sure everyone in this room has never gone over the speed limit. Truck drivers shouldn't do it. If they do it, then they're vulnerable for tickets, and that's what they do. Can he be everywhere at every time? No. Does he take it serious? Yes, he does.
And leaving your
Because we've
yard,
heard
though,
those
it's a reflection on you.
And
You're bringing the business here. You're bringing the trucks here.
They should do that. That's the way they should.
You can cut them off from filling if they're not following the rules you want the residents around you to follow, right? If you're concerned about your neighborhood and you want safety.
When they
you can
take
say,
the
you know what,
right
Mr.
out of our
Osterman,
facility, when they take the right out of the
excuse me, you can
facility.
say, you know what, Mr. Osterman, you're not following the rules that we want, we're not gonna give you gas.
Yeah, there you go.
Why not?
They deliver fuel for the building.
It's just, it's
That's
not
it.
one
It's all safe.
Talk about building a relationship.
Well,
with the
listen,
community.
you know what, I will tell you, I
Not
will
with
do
the
with the chief tomorrow for the, we know who transports out of that facility. We'll
Yeah.
send those CEOs letters saying you must take them right out of the facility.
Hey,
And we'll take it upon ourselves to do that, and say we're gonna ticket those people to the full extent of the law.
You're not the only one who
We
has
can do
power
that.
with that either. Tim.
Well, no, they have to do whatever they're going to do, but we can put pressure from our side to do that, to be a good neighbor, and we'll do that.
If I don't like somebody though, I don't have to work for them twice. Right?
Right.
If they're not following my rules, I don't have to fill them twice.
Yeah, I can't control that, but I can
No,
tell
you
you, I
can't.
can tell,
I know
I
you
can tell,
can't.
I can
I
tell
know
the
you can't.
CEO of those distribution companies, we are gonna ticket them severely for going over the bridge to trade or for not.
No,
taking
Tim, you weren't in town when Mr. Paulicelli was in town, but Mr. Paulicelli was a fine citizen. And I can remember being a little kid, him walking Waterville Street, door to door, asking all the residents, if you ever see one of my trucks in front of your house, speeding, or doing anything you don't like, you call me on this number. And that's a reach out of a fine human being to the neighborhood.
They were the most courteous drivers you ever saw.
To the point where you'd get upset because they'd be like, oh my God, this guy's doing 20 miles an hour. But you know what? They were
You were
hitting
behind
rules.
him?
Huh?
If you were behind him?
Yeah, oh yeah, you'd be upset, I'm telling you.
Well,
And that was
I'll
before
tell
you
you
were
that, I'll do that now.
But you know what? That's when people cared about the neighborhood. And that's all my point is. If, you know, the railroad is here. It's not going anywhere. Maybe it's time that we actually build a little relationship with the railroad and we can hear what's being said and say, you know what? I might have a little power here. Maybe I can help you with this. And then you know what? Like you said, you feel like we're coming at us. Maybe there wouldn't be much of a coming at us mentality used then. But
Fair enough.
where's the olive branch?
So any other questions?
Do you have any intention of increasing your loading area?
For propane?
No, for your tracks themselves. What's the future hold for that? Are you gonna take up property to increase, or?
I mean, right now, we have room to put one more track in for storage. We probably will do that. We're really focused on building out capacity further down the line because we're limited by space on the line we have right now.
I see that coming, because I see that you're really loading up real tight, trying to get the stuff in.
Yeah, I mean, we are tight, and that's why, we're building out the capacity further down the line to move stuff down further. I mean, it's not an ideal location to build a yard. We'd rather build it further down the line when it's on flat ground. No one likes building a yard on a hill.
Do it on the state hospital, and Tufts University.
The track line. So listen, just for everyone's sake, who is in favor, now you can vote more than once, but let's just go through all three of them. Who's in favor of Plan A that's coming?
I don't even know what the plans are. I mean, you took them off the screen.
Well, you told
I
us
don't want a
we're getting
one-way
that no
road.
matter
How
what, so
about we
why
start
go on
there?
that one?
I don't want a one-way road.
All right, we'll make it simple.
gates.
All right, who's in favor, who's not in favor of this plan? This is Plan C, which is the one-way road.
Not in favor. Not in favor. Who's not in favor?
Not in favor
You don't
of
like
making
it,
East
put the
Street a
hand up.
one-way road.
That's East Street.
That's everybody.
East Street.
Yeah.
Pretty much unanimous.
All right, so we got 14, 15 people. Okay. And
What
that's
about
impact the
fire
selectmen
trucks,
can
man?
take back, is that they heard from 14 or
What
15
about the fire
residents.
truck?
Nothing's gonna change, the fire trucks will go both ways on that street. If it's two-way
I
street.
thought you're blocking it off.
No,
You don't want it,
fire
so we're not
trucks.
gonna pursue the design.
We just said no.
If you don't wanna do it, I'll make the selectmen.
Yes,
say,
ma'am.
go for
You
it.
have one more question?
Honestly, I don't think that the neighborhood or any of the people were informed. I realize that this was on the website for the town, and the last posting was November 16th, from what I can remember. And so from then until now, there was no.
Yes, there was.
When
We did a lot of Facebook stuff.
When
I'm
was
not
it?
on Facebook.
I'm not on Facebook.
So a lot of people are not into
I
social
can't-
media, so couldn't have a little note gone out to all the abutters and whatever? Because a lot of people
We have a system in place of calling people if there's a propane leak. We have a list of phone numbers and emails already in
Let me
place.
ask you this, no one in this, do you think if there was more people here, you would get a different result?
No, I think you have more people other than.
You had more arguments.
Yeah.
More people would have been able to be here.
Well, we don't know what they don't know. You got here because you were told that you wanted to know. And you told us what you think and feel. We are taking that to heart.
Right, I'm just
Now,
saying.
we don't want you to say, oh, well, we're only 14 or 15 of them, so that's not a big deal. We've got the whole town to worry about. 14 people aren't gonna change the town laws.
And just so you know, I do feel like it's a good representative of the neighborhood, but if it is not, we are recording it, so people can watch this meeting, and if they have other input or comments, they should send them to the select board's office, and we will take that input into consideration at all. Today, we did receive correspondence from Peter Valentine, who is a neighbor, and he expressed his opinion. He would like a quiet zone, but he does not want a one-way. So, you know, it's unfortunate that, you know, as we would love that. But I do want to, while we're here, I would like to ask the railroad if we understand the horn blowing, the crossing of the streets, it has to happen. But is there any way to mitigate maybe the time it happens, so that it's not happening while people are sleeping or super early in the morning? We understand that it's there and why it needs to be there, but what we're asking for as a community is to try to mitigate that and make it as palatable as possible. Because right now, it is not okay the way it is.
So absolutely, I mean, and that's why we are pursuing the Chrissy grant, so that it'll give us the flexibility of keeping most of the movements up at the north end of the site and keeping some of the traffic, so we have the switching. And it'll take away the nighttime nuisance that, you know, I've heard and they hear from many complaints of the switching and the clanking sport at night. So yes, we are trying to do to what we can. We still need to operate to run a business. But where we have flexibility, we're trying to do it, which is, again, why we're going for this Chrissy grant, which the Board of Selectmen have partnered with us and supported. And again, it should eliminate all of the nighttime issues that you currently have right now. Beyond that, we still have to run the business just like everybody else has to run a business that has a start and an end date, and you got to move certain product through your system that's there.
Do you want to get the timeline for that grant? Because that doesn't have to on it.
Sure. So the grant was applied for. We are anticipating that there'll be some type of award in the spring. It is a difficult grant for the FRA to review. They have a whole team that reviews it, both on many different levels. Then from there, I think our timeline is that we would be hoping to have a contractual award by the end of the summer. And then from there, it could take 2 years for that to be built out. It could take a little bit longer, depending upon what it is. What we are going to do is to make the priority, is that the priority would be to try to build the new track alongside to get that done. The grant also includes upgrading rail and crossings all throughout the whole thing, so all the crossings can be upgraded to 115. The whole project is again, a few years long, but we're going to focus on doing it up in the North Grafton. It's not going to be an instantaneous fix, but nothing is instantaneous. Even when you build a road, you do something, it takes a while to plan it out, get it done, hire the contractor, and do all the work.
You do have to start, otherwise you won't get your funding.
So
Federal funding, correct?
Can't start before the
We
award.
can't start until we get funding.
So the grant money was never going to pay for all of this change?
So for A, B, and C, that's a separate grant. That money we already have for A and B. I'm sorry, for A. We only have money for
So
A.
the Chrissy money is only for the north?
Correct. We have not been awarded that. We've applied with a statewide team to make it happen.
Which our selectmen voted for without neighborhood approval.
I think you should try to really look at the plan and see what it is. It's on CSX land. that's down there, and it limits where you have the bulk of the neighbors down here. All right, any other questions, comments? Tim?
No, I thank everybody for coming, and we heard the community around it.